Shalom uvracha. Okay, we've got up to Mהרור. What exactly is Mהרור? The bitter herbs that we eat to remember the bitterness of the servitude in Egypt. Well, the Mishnah in Masechet Pesachim lists 5 different types of vegetables that are considered as Mהרור, as bitter. The first one is what we understand today, according to most of the rabbis, to be romaine lettuce. The second one, tamcha, is what some rabbis believe to be chrein or chazeret, the long root of horseradish that many people use on Seder night that they grate up to eat, that's very, very strong. How could romaine lettuce be considered Mהרור? Lettuce isn't so bitter. Now that root, the chazeret, the chrein, whoo, that'll clear your sinuses. But lettuce, why is lettuce Mהרור? So first of all, you should know that we're not the first ones to ask this question. The Yerushalmi Talmud asked this question. The Yerushalmi Talmud speaks and says, how could chasa, romaine lettuce, be considered as Mהרור? It's not so bitter. And the Gemara there answers and says, it's true that when you first eat it, chasa at the beginning is not bitter. But as it goes on, it gets more and more bitter. And that's just like our servitude in Egypt. At the beginning, when we went down to Egypt with Joseph and the brothers, we were close to the kingdom. We lived in Goshen. Everything was great. The Jewish people were in a place of wealth and security. It's only as our time went on in Egypt and things got worse and worse and we got into slavery, as the years went on, things became bitter. And the bitter herbs of chasa, of Mהרור, of the romaine lettuce remind us of this. Sweet at the beginning, bitter at the end. There are 2 ways to understand this, Yerushalmi. One way is that when you eat lettuce, at the beginning, it kind of tastes sweet. But if you eat it by itself, enough of it, it leaves a bitter taste in your mouth. That's one way to understand it. The other way to understand it is that when the lettuce grows in the ground, at the beginning of its growth, it's quite sweet. But if it's left in the ground for a longer and longer time, it turns more and more bitter. You can see this fact by the fact that the inner leaves, which are the youngest, freshest leaves, are actually much sweeter than the outer old leaves of the lettuce, which have a more bitter taste, which leads us to believe that if we would leave the lettuce in the ground for another week or 2, then the whole lettuce would turn to be very bitter. In fact, the Chazon Ish, one of the latter-day rabbis, holds like this and says that the lettuce we eat should actually be lettuce that was harvested quite late in its growth, so that it all has a very bitter taste. But most rabbis don't hold by that. Most rabbis say that our romaine lettuce is actually fine. And they explain it either because when you eat it by itself, it's sweet at the beginning, but then leaves a bitter taste, or because it's considered as the species of bitters and doesn't actually have to be too much of a bitter taste in your mouth. However it is, that is certainly the preferred option rather than using the chrein, the horseradish, that we used to use back when I was young in Chutz La'aretz, because it was hard to get green, fresh lettuce in Europe. Why is the root, the horseradish root, not the ideal thing to use? Well, first of all, the Mהרור has to be something that you can say a blessing on. The horseradish is so strong and no one really eats it in that raw form. It could be that it's not considered as a normal type of food, where it's very clear the vegetables we're supposed to eat for Mהרור are a real food, that we say the blessing, Brei Pri Adama, and that we eat them together. So how could it be that this horseradish would be considered food? On the other hand, there is a big tradition, and we did use it in Europe for many, many years, and those who have that tradition can keep using the horseradish. Problem is that it's very hard to eat a full measure of it, and that's why it's probably better to use the pieces of romaine lettuce, to clean them very, very well from bugs before Seder night. To buy here in Israel, you can buy the bug-free lettuce, to clean it very, very well, and to use it because, first of all, it's easier to eat the right amount, and second of all, it's first on the list. This year, when we eat the Mהרור and remember our bitterness in Egypt, we can also remember and maybe even tell over the Yerushalmi that the bitterness of the lettuce starts sweet and ends bitter, just like our servitude in Egypt started sweet and ended bitter. May the good Lord, chasa, the Hebrew word for let us, have mercy upon us, like the word chas. May he have mercy upon us and upon all of the Jewish people, that we should be speedily redeemed for an ultimate redemption, speedily in our days, and have a wonderful Pesach. Hag Sameach.